what is the key parameters which a founder should look in the advisor who's coming on board, who's going to be a mentor, whether he brings in the money or does not bring in the money?
Look for complementary skills. I think there's always need for skills that you might not have in your team. That person can guide you on how to get to market, how to go through agreements and make sure you don't make rookie mistakes. Advise startups on fundraise, helping them raise anywhere from, let's say, a few tens of lakhs up to millions of dollars in rounds ranging from seed to Series A. My philosophy is that for a startup to take debt, it imposes fixed costs on variable revenue. So it makes a startup much riskier. This is textbook theory, and it's true for startups.
After a successful season 1, welcome to season 2 of the HashTag show. Today in our studio, we have Devang Mehta, and we're going to be deep diving into the world of early stage technology in India. Devang is deeply, he's been a part of the startup ecosystem, advising startups on their fundraising strategies and helping HNIs navigate their investment opportunities. So let's jump into today's conversation. I'm super excited to explore potential of India's tech scene. Hi Devang.
Hello.
So welcome. This is the season 2. We finished season 1 last month in December. We did 8 episodes. Each season is of 8 episodes, and we basically do conversation with developers, financial experts, Bollywood, media personality. So Devang, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your journey? How did you start? What is the your role, and what have you been doing, say, in the last 20 odd years in terms of technology, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of advisory, consulting, whatever, investments? So just can we have a brief about yourself?
Absolutely. Again, thanks for having me. So I am an investor in and advisor to early stage technology companies in India and US primarily. My background includes more than 2 decades of operational experience and educational experience in the USA with early stage companies, including 2 or 3 startups in the Silicon Valley. I am trained in computer science and engineering and have an MBA from Carnegie Mellon University. I advise startups on fundraise, helping them raise anywhere from, let's say, a few tens of lakhs up to millions of dollars in rounds ranging from seed to Series A. And I also am advising Anthill Ventures, a fund that I founded and took to final close. I'm advising them on portfolio exits as well as...
What's the name of the fund?
Anthill Ventures.
Anthill.
It is
So you founded that fund?
I built the first SEBI registered fund, which is an AIF Cat 1 fund that focuses on seed stage investing in startups across India primarily. I am helping them with portfolio exits and helping harvest the investments they've made. Aside from that, I advise startups. As I mentioned, I advise funds. I am frequently covered by the media. I talk a lot about early stage investing in India, trends that I see, and I am closely associated with a couple of startups in the biotech space, primarily a company called Early Sign, which is into early cancer detection through saliva. I just helped them close a $2 million round of funding, which is led by one of India's foremost public market investors, Mr. Ashish Kacholia.
Ashish is quite in news right now.
Yes, he's his reputation, of course, is built around his success in the public market. He's known.
I think Ashish is also promoting and backing Anand Pandit, the Lotus developer group. They're coming with an IPO. So I think Ashish is backing Anand Pandit also.
That's correct. So aside from that, through another common contact of mine, I got in touch with him. So it's very heartening to note that aside from traditional investments, which is real estate and public market, investors are going into very early stage private equity, which is startups at a more or less, I wouldn't say R&D phase, but in the clinical trial phase and a fair bit away from commercialization.
So Devang, why don't you give us an idea in terms of investments?
Yes.
Which typically is for startups, right? Because I think India, if the way we want to grow, it's very important that the SMEs and startups are promoted very well, right? Yes. So keeping that in mind, do you want to just give us an idea in what are the different stages of investments and what is the typical kind of a size of the investment? Can you give us an idea?
Sure. So
right from your seed to angel to whatever it's known as?
Yeah. So usually, a company gets incorporated, what we call the hostile phase, where as it could be typically young engineers that hit upon a great idea in fintech or whatever. The first round of funding is typically raised from friends and family. It's called friends and family round. Very forgiving money, a few tens of lakhs. I know you from childhood. You're thinking of a bright idea.
So normally these investors don't come on the cap table.
No, they are on the cap table, absolutely. But
they are or they are not?
They are.
Okay.
They are on the cap table, absolutely.
But do you advise a startup founder to have a friend, because they're not typically giving a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So then having them on the cap table, don't you think that dilutes their equity?
No, it does dilute equity, of course. I think the point is that at an idea stage, it's very hard to get funded in India from institutional capital or even formal, serious angel capital. So people that let's say a dad, uncle, childhood friend, they are more accommodating, more forgiving of your, the need.
And they're not there with an investor lens.
Correct.
What is the return? What happened?
Yeah.
Once you go on the market and once you get money from the investor,
correct.
I think that becomes a little bit different.
Correct. So that becomes more the treadmill syndrome where you have to keep running
so
more and achieving more.
You have to be more responsible and answerable.
Right. So this friends and family round is typically, I'd say up to 50 lakhs, just broadly is money to last for about a year or two, hire a small team, get office space, do some sales marketing, build out your product. And then they go to the first, what I call outside round, outside of the immediate circle, which is an angel round or a seed round. It just depends on the scenario.
Is there a difference between seed and angel?
There is technically, but I think these terms meld into each other very commonly. So I think they are used interchangeably in many scenarios. Angel refers to individuals investing, and there could be a VC, a seed stage VC that invests the same amount of money, in which case it's called a seed round.
Okay.
But
so that means you can have an individual investor, like in your individual capacity as an angel investor, and put in about 10, 20, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, whatever the amount is.
Correct.
Or you could be part of a VC fund, or a VC fund is investing, which then I guess called a seed fund.
Yeah. So there are seed stage VCs that put in about $1 million, and there it could be easily a syndicate of angels that put in $1 million. So it's the same in terms of amount of money. It's just called an angel round or a seed round.
How is the growth of the? I can see a lot of. So India has seen very successful startups, and the number of unicorns and the number of startups are all growing right now.
Right.
So there is and with our Prime Minister and our ministers like Amit Shah and Piyush Goyal kind of significantly promoting the startup ecosystem. There is a lot of interest right now from angel investors who are traditionally not investing in the startups, right?
Right.
So what is the growth of these network? There are multiple angel networks right now.
Right.
So what is the growth of these networks? Because typically an angel investor will not really know the nuances of investing into a startup.
Right.
That's when a network which is more professional and more organized kind of is there.
Correct.
Right? So
yeah, so I think it's a key enabling element of the ecosystem. The growth of networks like the Indian Angel Network or Venture Catalysts or many others. There's at least a dozen across the country, notable networks, and what they do is they band together angels, so they can pull in money together through some
like a syndicate.
Through a syndicate, either through an SPV, or now in some cases they are also forming their own angel funds, even within IAN. So they get money together, and then also have a small professional.
So you have an AIF formed.
Yeah, an AIF angel fund.
Angel fund.
I
think that's the
formed by IAN has one. Mumbai Angels, I believe, has one. AHA Ventures has one. So
Amit is appearing in my next podcast.
Okay.
He's the guest next Wednesday.
I know Amit, he's a good guy, IIT Bombay.
So Amit was one of my first friends in the startup ecosystem, and about 2.5 years ago, I kind of accidentally ventured into the startup ecosystem. So that's when I met Amit.
Right.
And Amit said that, you've been doing real estate for now 3 decades.
Yeah.
So why don't you explore the startup? So that's how
right.
then I became a member of Thai, Mumbai, and so the journey has been nice. I've done some small investments in a common friend, Fendora.
Kind of.
So we'll talk about Fendora also. We'll talk about media tech.
Sure.
So let's continue. So you are now saying that so we have a growth of the angel network.
Right. And the other key part is you touched upon it yourself, is that the traditional mentality, especially in Mumbai, has been to invest in the public market or in real estate. So startups as an asset class is still relatively new, but growing rapidly, because now people are finally taking a portfolio approach to their entire. So let's say you have 10 CR of investable money, you put maybe 40 in public market, 30 in real estate.
So when you say public market, you're referring to the IPO.
Yeah, no, classical.
What do you define? How do you define public market?
Through your broker, buy HDFC or Reliance stock.
The stock.
Stock.
So public market is stock.
Stocks.
The shares in stock.
Shares in stocks or index funds. Basically, I mean.
Or mutual funds.
Yeah, or mutual funds, which track.
So that's called the public market.
Yeah.
And what you invest is called the private market.
Private market, because these shares are not publicly traded, right?
Got it.
Let's say pre-IPO, you put money into Zomato or Nike or Mama Earth, or these are now public companies. But let's take PhysicsWallah, which is an edtech company. It's not publicly traded. You invest in PhysicsWallah, you have to wait for a IPO or an
till it gets
someone
IPO.
Buys your shares. But
yeah. So that's an exit route, basically.
There's no exchange available for you to tomorrow go and say, I want to sell my PhysicsWallah shares. There's no ready buyer, like in a public stock market. So that's a startup, private equity. And so people are beginning to realize the benefits of putting a small portion of their overall investable money into the private market.
So private equity fund are bigger than the VC funds?
Yeah, private equity in that
they're the larger
in that amount. Sense refers to larger pools of capital and later stages of funding. So they typically
the risk element is less.
Risk element is less.
So the return also will be comparatively less.
Yeah, returns tend to be a bit muted because they are investing in companies either as mezzanine capital, just companies that are en route to an IPO in the next few months or a year, or more mature companies that are cash flow generating, where the value has been accreted. But you maybe sometimes you need a change of management to realize more returns or things like that. But it doesn't have the exponential growth curve ahead of it that typically a VC can enjoy.
How much debt is normally do startup founders? They follow that route of taking debt. I believe there are a lot of banks, obviously lending money to the startup founders.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to raise money?
It's philosophical. I believe in a startup.
What's your philosophy? What's your take?
My philosophy is that for a startup to take debt, it imposes fixed costs on variable revenue. So it makes a startup much riskier. This is textbook theory, and it's true for startups. The moment you take a large amount of debt and your revenues are lumpy, it can make your startup veer towards bankruptcy or make it much more riskier. But in general, if your cash flows, your top line is a bit more moderate, it's predictable, there's not that much risk, then taking a small amount of debt is okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, and it's done for scenarios where the valuation is not maybe understood well by investors. So if a founder goes for pure equity dilution, they face a substantial dilution, which is not acceptable. In some cases, it puts the founder equity in single digits. So
that's not good, right?
Yeah, that's not good, because then the founder loses the interest in the company. It becomes like a project. Like I'm like a 7% holder.
So typically, I mean, just again a ballpark figure. According to you, what is the equity which typically a startup founder should keep with himself or herself till you go till at least to the exit stage or Series A round?
Yeah, I think ideally at exit, a founder should own between 40 to 50% of the company.
40 to 50%?
Let's say 40%.
That's quite a good amount of...
Well, okay, yeah, 30 to 40%, let's say. I mean, they should have, because look, there's not just one founder. I'm saying the whole group of founders.
Okay.
So let's say there are 3 founders, they each own about 10, 12%. That adds up to 35, 40%. Investors hold about 40 to 50% of the company, all the way from seed to Series A, B, C, and then 10% through ESOPs.
So that's my next question to you now. So typically in a startup, you have more than one founder.
Yes.
Typically you don't have one founder. Typically they are co-founders.
Yes.
and then as you're creating your company and you're building your team, then you also have ESOPs.
That's correct.
So that's what makes the core of the startup, right?
That's correct. A good ESOP pool makes it easier to hire good talent.
Good talent.
Yes, because the moment you start hiring a VP of engineering, a VP of marketing, VP of sales, those people are most likely going to get below industry average salaries, because the startup typically does not pay as high as a MNC or traditional company, but the upside is in the equity. So if you have a good pool of equity to dish out to VP level or even key engineers or things like that, it helps you attract a much more stronger pool of talent.
Devang, what do you think is the role of an advisor and a mentor when we talk about, and again I'm going to split my question into two.
Yes.
So fortunately, unfortunately, today a lot of consultants are there in the market. They are on LinkedIn, and I'm not a very big fan of these consultants, because probably they don't have that much of an experience of running a business, but just because of their education and qualification, they go out in the market. And I've seen a lot of startup founders hiring them or taking them on board, and there's a lot of huge expectation from the advisor and from the consultant. So if you want to break this question into what is the key parameters which a founder should look in the advisor who's coming on board, who's going to be a mentor, whether he brings in the money or does not bring in the money. So there are two parts of it.
That's
One
correct.
is advisory in terms of building up the company.
That's correct. So look for complementary skills. So let's say you're two really smart engineers that have some deep tech in cybersecurity or cure for cancer or things like that, but you don't have necessarily the marketing finesse, the communication finesse, the ability to articulate to other investors and all. So look for someone with those skills to bring on as advisor. It might not be a full-time role, and whether he or she invests or not, I think it's a parallel question, but I think there's always need for skills that you might not have in your team. That person can guide you on how to get to market, how to go through agreements and make sure you don't make rookie mistakes, how to get funded. That's a key role of an advisor, to connect you to investors and help you to articulate properly through the pitch deck and other means that enables you to attract capital. Those are the key roles typically of an advisor, at least the situations I've been part of. There are other scenarios.
Any conflicts between the founder and the advisor?
No, there shouldn't be.
You end up, because we're all human beings, right?
Yeah. So I haven't ended up in any such scenarios where there's conflicts, but what you mentioned is the earlier part of the question. There could be mismatched expectations, where
So I think it's very important that once you have identified the advisor,
yes,
so-called quote-unquote mentor, it should be very, very well defined. What are you expecting from the mentor or the advisor or the consultant?
Correct. So definitely make sure that you interview them. If you want to, you should speak to other startups that have been advised by the same advisor and ask for their candid opinion of how the experience was over.
Is there any kind of a norm in terms of equity? How much equity typically an advisor or a consultant or a mentor will take?
There's there's a broad range of numbers. I think it's usually low single-digit percentage of the company.
So about 2%,
Yeah.
4%, 5%, depending on.
In that range, 2 to 4%, and it vests over a few months or a couple of years. And
Devang, how long have you been in the startup ecosystem now?
I'd say for at least
I'm talking of like full time.
more than 2 decades, because even in my operational roles in the US, I was part of startups.
So let's now deep dive into the 20 years
Yes.
of your experience. So we are now in 2025, and you would have been started your journey in 2005.
Yes.
So what are the changes have you seen, both from the founder perspective in the last 20 years, the mindset of the founder, and from the investment landscape?
Yeah, I think from an Indian perspective.
From Indian perspective.
Yeah, there's been a a transformational change in the ecosystem.
Huge change, right?
Huge, yeah. I mean, for example, when I was growing up, there was no notion of a startup. You always just studied, you went abroad, got a master's degree, you did a job. I mean, people didn't. Starting a company means doing some buying and selling of something with a bank loan.
Trading कर लिया,
yeah,
दुकान खोल दी,
exactly.
export कर लिया.
Import, export, and no innovation, no talk about building an e-commerce company or IoT, all these things. So I think, I'm sure there were people before that, but probably Flipkart changed the culture in our country.
So according to you, the Indian startup ecosystem is about 2 decades or 3 decades?
Yeah, roughly early 2000s, early 2000.
Early 2000.
The true shaping of the ecosystem. When the ecosystem is not only startups.
And that's when even the global economy was opening up.
Yes. Our economy did open up in 91.
91,
progressively,
yeah,
but I think the first wave was just IT services. Right?
I got it.
So Infosys, and we just began exporting services and talent to the world. That itself was great because it built the seeds of entrepreneurial culture in the country.
So from the global perspective, 1990 is when we had the India was exposed to the global scenario.
We began thinking bigger.
Got it. And at that point of time, it was more of the IT services.
Correct.
That's how you had your Infosys and Satyam and
Correct.
all those big Hotmail or whatever happened.
Correct. But again, these were services companies. So the structure of a services company typically is that you don't necessarily need upfront funding, because you can start off with bootstrap capital, and there's not a phase where there's just R&D and there's no revenue, but there's just spending. That doesn't happen in a services company. So by definition, they didn't need venture capital or angel investing or risk capital that much. I think, like I said, the early 2000s, the notion of startups and how to build something substantive that can scale to crores of millions of users, that can attract outside capital in return for equity, that whole ecosystem began sprouting in the early 2000s.
Consultant / advisor / mentor / investor. I think it's a very, very crucial, very important, and it's a committed kind of a role.
Right.
What has been your experience with startup? Do you want to give us some examples? Let's talk about good examples where when you came on board, what was your experience with these young startup founders?
Yes, again, my favorite startup of all time, of course, is Early Sign. They do early cancer detection through saliva. So it's a groundbreaking innovation.
Yeah, so we have Early Sign here on your profile. Do you want to tell us about Early Sign?
Yes.
You seem to be pretty excited about it.
Yes. It's a company based out of Nagpur. It came out of academia, and a very personalized story where one of the founders, a close relative, had a disease that was detected a bit late, as a result of which that person had to undergo a lot of treatment and continues to undergo a lot of treatment. And that founder, at a very personal, at a very visceral level, kept thinking that if only my relative knew earlier that she had this disease, there could have been so much pain and angst avoided if we are able to treat it before it spread or before it became much worse. So that person became evangelized to the idea of early detection of diseases, and they hit upon the idea of cancer along with a fellow researcher based out of Nagpur again.
So that they focus on cancer.
Cancer. So now detection of cancer today is largely done through biopsies and blood draws. Traditional processes that are a bit expensive, invasive, and not as accurate. So they have started off by doing early cancer detection through saliva. So they have found a characteristic of cancer that gets caught in the saliva of a person. And they're starting off with oral and throat cancers because obviously there's more saliva around the mouth cavity. So they have a nice kit. You literally, the person spits into the kit, and in a few hours.
And this kit's available across the counter?
Yeah, it will be available. In theory, it will be available once they get permissions for marketing, which we hope will happen as early as April of this year.
So I can just buy the kit and I can...
You can order a kit just like you order Suburban to come to your house and take a blood draw and measure cholesterol and all that. Now you'll be able to literally, let's say you're a smoker, God forbid, and you're at more risk of cancer, you can literally spit into it, and in a couple of hours you'll have a profile of low, medium and high, and other parameters, which will then enable you to go in for more expensive diagnostics about cancer. But the idea is that this kit will be fairly cheap, at least when done at scale, and it's a great innovation. And I helped them raise angel money. I helped them raise the seed round of 16 CR, which is all over the media now.
16.
Yeah, $2 million, led by Ashish Kacholia.
Yeah.
It's a great group of people to work with, innovative, young. They are energetic. They are driven by missionary zeal to make this available pan-India and to avoid all the suffering that goes along with late detection of cancer.
So India is the most populated country now. We have beaten China.
Yes.
There is a rise of wealth being created.
Yes.
So Saif Ali Khan, who was stabbed a few days back, his hospital bill ran to about 35 lakhs.
Yes.
So what do you think now with startups, with innovation, with healthcare, with biotech, where do you see the healthcare and the biotech space growing from here?
Again, early detection of anything, literally any disease, is literally the difference between life and death. Cancer, diabetes, asthma, sickle cell, anything.
And like you said, it saves a lot of pain.
Yeah, pain. I mean, so cancer specifically, most people know this, it starts off at one region of the body. If it's detected there, it can be localized and.
So it's the stage
cured.
1.
Stage 1 or stage 0.
Or stage 0, stage 1.
And by the way, early sign detects it at stage 0, at what they call the lesion stage or pre-cancer stage. So when it's about to start, which is the cells start multiplying abnormally, before that or just at that point, they can catch a cancer. If you catch a cancer at that point, there is enough cures around there to at least either cure it or at least contain it. So it stays at one part of the body.
So do you say now that, this is very interesting, right?
Yes.
That do you think healthcare is improving? We
It
having
is.
good doctors and good facilities?
No, sir. Yeah,
with the
doctors and
hospitals?
facilities is of course one aspect of it. With the wealth effect in India, there's people with money to spend. There's bound to be good hospitals and doctors that will serve these people. So that's definitely one part of the equation, the macroeconomics of it.
So that's good.
That's good. But the innovation will necessarily come from early stage companies. I don't think it will come from big pharma or other bigger established players. They have their set models, which is fine, that work for them. I think the innovation in terms of either detecting cancer early or curing cancer through immunotherapies or next gen technologies will come from the startup ecosystem.
Very, very interesting. Do you want to differentiate life science, healthcare, biotech?
Yes.
Do you want to give an idea? Because I think this space is what excites you
Yes.
the most right now.
Yes. Those definitions tend again to overlap and intersect with each other. I see healthcare from a startup standpoint, healthcare as being the over encompassing umbrella that includes all this. But healthcare startups in India have usually meant a couple of things so far. One is just discounting medicines, Practo and the likes, just giving you discounted medicines at home.
So 1mg or whatever.
Yeah,
it's called.
1mg Practo. That was one layer of startup
So
growth.
getting your medicines at home.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
more like Amazon or whatever you
Correct.
want to call it.
Which was great. Again, in India, anything that has a mass market will make money. But it is
Because it's a number game.
It's a numbers game. It's more of an innovation at the logistics level. How to get something to you quickly, cheaper, faster, more efficient. There's also a lot of innovation came around doctor CRMs, which basically means that how do you handle a patient appointment better? How do you manage a follow-up better?
So
the
efficient
medication,
way of
prescription,
practice.
that whole interaction between doctor and patient, which was done manually through handwritten notes and all that, that was done better through these platforms. That was one layer of innovation. It lended itself to some fintech models where people that couldn't afford elective surgeries could get zero interest loans and paid off over a length of time. So there was some intersection of fintech and health tech. But biotech specifically refers to pure innovation. It refers to curing disease very personalized at a molecular level through early detection, through immunotherapy, which is a hot area. There's a startup that I'm working with that does cancer cure through a technology called CAR-T, CAR-T, which is pretty much the most exciting technology across the world for targeting cancer cells and how do you cure cancer. using this technology. There's another company I'm working with that's doing some work in oncolytic viruses. Another very exciting technology. These are for brain tumors, which they describe, and not a lot of doctors describe it basically as a death sentence. If you have a brain tumor, you basically have
absolutely
X number of months. And people are
very. I am aware of it.
Candid, and a lot of people like you, I notice you're getting a little bit teary-eyed. They have, the moment they hear such things, they get very emotive about it, because often there's a close relative or a friend or a first degree in the network.
And it's very helpless, right?
Yeah, and if you've seen that suffering, you'll know what these people are talking about.
What do you think is going to be the role of AI now?
AI is AI, the word will become how the word software was in the previous generation. So like in the first set of startups, like cloud-based software for CRM or marketing automation or things like that, good business plans didn't say we are a software. It was assumed we are a software company. In other words, you're not a hardware company, because hardware companies typically have not gotten funded because they're capital intensive. So no one used the word software. They just assume we are a CRM or we are something else. We are a collaboration tool. So same thing, AI will not be used in business plans. In the sense, no one say I'm an AI company, because it's a bit silly. It's assumed that you have AI, you have ML, you have a large language model or something similar that helps you harness large amounts of data to come out with insights that help your technology.
But I think in medical perspective, this could be pretty helpful, right?
Yeah. So there's aspects of AI which are definitely
robotics also will play a role.
Helpful. Robotics, both. I'll give you an example of each. So robotics, for example, I've been told is useful for certain scenarios where when a surgeon is doing an operation, a surgeon has tremor. There's human tremor. You're putting some instrument inside, and there's sometimes that is literally the difference between.
That's human, right?
Yeah, human. Because
if I am operating,
you need a lot of force sometimes, and that 1 millimeter can make a difference. So now let's say you have
it's life and death.
Yeah, literally. Now let's say you have a robotic arm that's just holding you steady, and you're just doing it right. So that's one example of where
very interesting
robotics can help. They won't replace surgeons.
No, not replace surgeons.
But they'll help capture and conquer human elements that cause error or other fatalities, God forbid, in a surgical procedure. That's one example.
I think it's very interesting that this perspective of what you are saying makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And this can be a big game changer.
Correct.
And
same thing with AI. Sorry to interrupt you. So the aspects of pathology. So what is pathology? You take a blood draw, you put it on a slide, and then there's a very human intensive way of looking at for patterns in the blood draw. Now that is the more or less the old school way of doing things, because it's very error prone, it's human intensive, there's long hours of peering. If there's a layer of AI that can come in and make some recommendations, they see some clustering here, they see some trends here and things, and then a human element, a human trained pathologist acts on that layer of AI. It makes the whole process much more efficient, much more less human prone, less fatigue prone, and things like that. So a layer of AI can add great efficiencies to pathology.
Very interesting. Where do you think the cost now? So there is one more. I mean, this is not directly connected to what we are talking about, startups. I think there is one more awareness, Devang, which needs to be done, is insurance.
Yes.
Indians, as per nature, they are not. I'm talking of Mediclaim now.
Yes.
I'm not talking of the life insurance.
Yes.
Is insurance very, very neglected? If we are not having, I'm talking about Mediclaim now.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, but I know there's a.
It's a very low number.
Yeah, it's not very low, but it's compared to the Western world, I think it's still low, and I think insurance companies also will progressively get smarter. They can use diagnostic kits, right? I mean, what does an insurance company do? It does a risk profile, right, of a person who's of a certain age, of a certain dispensation, family history, and you create a profile and you determine the premium. So if you are able to detect something and then cover it in the in the coverage schedule, it makes an insurance company also faster and more tech driven. So it naturally lends itself to better insurance industry across the country.
Correct.
So I don't see how if adopted well, they can stand to gain from all these technologies we just talked about.
Because lifespan, see, if you
Yeah.
look at, I mean, I know my father-in-law is 90 plus.
Yes.
So the lifespan is increasing. People are living for 80, 90 years now.
Right.
So I think all what we've been discussing in the last 40, 45 minutes is all interconnected with insurance, with diagnosis, with surgery, robotics and all. So
Right.
this all is going to be, it'll play a very important part in improving the quality of life of a human being.
Absolutely, and everything in a more advanced economy, which we are heading to, it all gets intertwined, right? Early detection, cures, insurance, post treatment recovery, remote monitoring, along with the whole ecosystem around it. It all gets part of a more mature healthcare and innovation ecosystem.
Cancer,
Yes.
we discussed about it, is one of the most, I mean, it's painful, and it's something which we all, it's a dreadful kind of a disease. What is your perspective in terms of cancer, and what are the innovations you are looking right now in the cancer, in the oncology space?
Right. So for sure, it still is a large problem, and in many areas it's still intractable. The first step is early detection. We have spoken
Which we just spoke about.
early sign at length. It's a great first layer of innovation. Now let's talk about scenarios where a cancer has occurred. Now a cancer typically spreads across the body. It's a process called metastasis, where it starts in one area, let's say liver, and it spreads to, let's say, bone marrow, which is a common area where a cancer.
So cancer typically starts it attacks
It's localized.
one area,
Yeah.
localized,
Yeah.
and then it spreads.
And then through the bloodstream, typically it spreads to other parts of the body. It's something called a seed and soil hypothesis, where the seed is the cancer and the soil refers to some fertile, quote unquote, fertile area of the body where it naturally migrates to, because the intrinsics of that area of the body makes it fertile for cancer cells.
Got it.
Okay, so it spreads. Now, so the first thing is you catch it locally, you can contain it there so it doesn't spread, makes it much less painful. Now, how do you, if it's there in the body, how do you attack it? So there's a great area of innovation around immuno-oncology. So our immune system attacks cells and cures diseases like a cold, cough, any external element which is deleterious to the body, our immune system is set up to cure it. Now, what cancer cells do, as you might know, is that they fool the immune system into saying that we are normal cells. So, the immune system doesn't know that, it cannot detect between a normal cell and a cancer cell.
Cancer cell.
So it doesn't attack it. So that's how it starts spreading.
Uh-huh.
Now, how do you cure it? You try carpet bombing, like chemo. So then, what chemo does, and radiation and other things, they don't distinguish really between healthy and
That's why it's called
cancer
carpet
cells.
bombing.
Yeah, it's carpet bomb. So sure, it might get rid of a lot of cancerous cells, but you also lose your hair.
I read in interview of Sonali Bendre,
Yeah,
and this carpet bombing word she
Yes.
has used in that interview,
correct.
and it's quite a painful kind of experience.
Yeah, because you might get cured of liver cancer, or at least you might contain it, but then there's all the adjacent organs that also get attacked by radiation and chemo. So you feel very tired. Organs don't function the way because you've just been attacked by waves and waves of radiation or things like that. So the more advanced technologies now can distinguish between cancerous cells and healthy cells.
Very interesting. Our conversation is becoming more medical now.
Yes, it is.
But that's because of your interest in this investment.
Yes.
Very quickly, let's now shift our discussion towards investors.
Yes.
Okay, we spoke about innovations, we spoke about biotech, we spoke about startup founders. Where do you think is the shift now happening from the investment landscape perspective?
So refreshingly and thankfully, there's a critical mass of investors that are allocating part of their investable money into early stage startups in the healthcare space and otherwise, which is a pretty seminal shift in India's investing culture, actually, historically, if you see. that will naturally lend itself to a lot of money going into startups directly or through venture capital funds into startups. And that will dramatically increase the speed and the level of innovation in all areas in our country.
So I think this is very important that we have the traditional and the conventional investors looking at startup as a asset class.
Yes.
And I think a lot is being done with the kind of television shows and with the media houses like Shraddha Sharma, Inc. 42, Your Story. So there are a lot of these conventions and meets happening right now.
Right.
So I think this is going to be growing. And Devang, I also when I said I have invested some money in Satish's venture. You feel as an investor, it's a small amount of money, 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs. You feel good about it.
That's correct.
That you're helping out a founder to achieve the dream. I think it's a very good feeling also.
Yes. Yeah, it's always a very warm feeling. So any investment creates jobs and wealth in our country, which definitely helps many aspects of our economy. Now, not all investments are equal. There are some in areas which are, I wouldn't say not required, but they don't necessarily. Just take an example: a betting site. People invest in a betting site that creates jobs and wealth, fine, but it doesn't really help us in any way apart from that. It's fine. But in healthcare, not just does it create jobs and wealth for
You're saving lives.
You're saving lives. It's a huge societal impact.
Very nice.
It's unquestionable. There's multiple layers of warmth and fuzziness that you described. The moment like a cancer startup gets successful, you think of the hundreds of millions of lives that you might save or the meaningful years added to. It's hard to question the beauty of investing in an early stage.
Very nice. Any tips for investors?
Yes, for sure. Do your due diligence on founders. Definitely speak to people in the industry before making an investment, especially for hard to understand, like immuno is not a field that is easy to understand. Speak to advisors, experts in the field to understand the commercial.
Should they be part of these angel investor networks?
Yeah, those help because then there's wisdom of the crowds, right? Larger pool of people bring in their thinking hats, so there's bound to be more learnings from there. And but definitely allocate a part of your portfolio towards the early stage ecosystem, because for the right startup and even on a weighted average scale, there are outsized returns to be made in today's market.
Well, I think winter we had a bad time, a few years or a few months.
Yes.
I think we are now we're over that. Suddenly the startup ecosystem has become very vibrant.
Yes.
And there are a lot of money now chasing. What is in your perspective 2025 looking from the startup perspective, from the funding perspective?
Correct. So I think we are past that funding winter. We are into a classical spring. We are seeing this quintessential green shoots, as they call, that are sprouting in the ecosystem is coming into its own. For sure, success stories of startups, what were startups a few years ago that went public, most notably Zomato, proves that there exists a well-formed or maturing ecosystem in India where a company can start off.
So that the entire ecosystem is getting matured now.
Yeah, because there are success stories.
Success stories, yeah.
Flipkart, Mama Earth, Zomato, Physics Wala. Physics Wala is not public yet, but the edtech sector, which was for a few months highly depressed after the Byju's story and all that broke. Then Physics Wala raised a round at a very good valuation. Again, the sector is coming back into its own. So these stories serve to prove that it's possible to start a good company in India, get funded through seeds, Series A, B, C, go IPO or get acquired. In Flipkart's case, that $1 billion plus
very nice
acquisition in India is possible in India.
Got it.
When Walmart acquired Flipkart, it ticked one big box with a solid green tick. It is possible for a company formed in India to get funded and and sell for more than $1 billion.
And it's an inspiration to the founders.
So then there's a case study, right?
Case study.
There's case studies, as a formal case studies through ISB or IIMs and all. There are literal case studies on how you can build a successful company in India and get a great exit. And there are cultural case studies that, this startup did that, raised 50 million. We should try and emulate them, or at least learn from their the best practices of that startup.
Devang, do you think the Indian government needs to rethink factors like taxation or something which can, accelerate the Indian startup ecosystem?
For sure, there's a reform needed there, and reform is happening, to be fair to the government. The angel tax, which was really onerous on a startup, I'm sure you know about that.
I'm aware of that, yeah.
Basically, a startup had to be careful of what valuation it inferred at any round. Now, look, if you're a biotech startup, if an angel investor is convinced that you have a cure for cancer, they'll just say, okay, I think you're worth 100 CR. Why not? But it was very hard, I think, for
so the angel tax is abolished, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's abolished. It's abolished.
The last budget.
But prior to that, it is abolished. So it's an example of how the government has acted in the right way. But prior to that, the mentality was that there's a notion of fair market valuation, which is frankly subjective, because everyone knows startup valuation is very hard to infer. So
there is no standard way of valuation.
Yeah, exactly. So a startup in immunotherapy, if you are a typical stock market investor, you think, I'm not sure, maybe it's worth 20, 30 CR at best. There could be an oncologist putting in 1 CR, I'm sure you're worth 100 CR.
Very nice.
Because I know what you're doing, right? So now there's two different kinds of investors. But the government was saying at that point, or the law was saying at that point, was this person, if they put in at 100 CR, there's some extra normal aspect to the valuation that has to be taxed. So in other words, it makes it very hard for a startup to have super funding rounds and exponential growth trajectories, because the government was somehow putting a dampener, or again I should say the law was putting a dampener on outsized valuation numbers.
Does it make a difference, Devang, if I, as a founder, have founded my company in Singapore, Dubai, Bombay, Delhi, or San Francisco?
So it's an interesting question, the question of jurisdiction. Again, for many years it was somehow the culture or the public opinion that if you wanted a sizable exit, you should flip your jurisdiction to outside of India, Singapore or Delaware or whatever. And I think now the
Delaware seems to be the first choice.
The first choice, because
it's more friendly.
It's friendlier in terms of
taxation point of view.
Taxation standpoint and other things. But now if you might have read, the reverse is happening. So Zepto, which by all news is IPO bound, is reverse flipping from Singapore to India.
Zepto is a case study in itself.
Yeah.
Perfect case study. Very how to amazing startup.
Someone called it Ghar Wapsi.
Ghar
Wapsi for startups. So they incorporated in Singapore, and now they're moving back to India. Because they just figured out the ecosystem, the taxation, the exit parameters, and all are more favorable in India.
Devang, do you feel that when you are having a successful startup?
Yes.
तो कुछ देश की भावना, कुछ हिंदुस्तानीपन लगता है कि ये देसी है?
Yeah, made in India is great. I mean,
it does make a difference.
Sure. If a cure for a disease gets found in India, I always wonder, we are unfortunately the diabetes capital of the world for certain kind of cancers. Why can't a cure be found in India? There's all the enabling elements. We have smart engineers, we have smart biologists. Venture money is coming into India in a meaningful way for innovation.
That would be my next question anyway.
And again, for good or for bad, it's easier to scale just in India. If you have a cure for diabetes, you have crores of people suffering from it. So you can be wildly successful just in India.
Correct. So because of my background in real estate,
yes,
we have Blackstone of the world, good amount of foreign money chasing assets here in India. So are we seeing the same thing in startups now? Private equity funds coming in?
Yeah, there are. It's a lot of.
Can you name a few private equity International Global Private Funds.
So, the Canadian Pension Fund
That's a big one, right?
is a big one. They've made investments into the Indian ecosystem through venture capital funds. So, they act as what is known as a limited partner or an LP into funds. And then that money eventually makes itself into the startup ecosystem in India. There are many others like that, significant institutions, HNIs, family offices from outside of India that are finding the best returns in the Indian market.
Very good here now. Family office.
Yes.
I think that's another big thing now.
Yeah.
Like we spoke about the HNIs, family offices are also now, something interesting would be Bollywood now.
Yes.
Bollywood is investing, cricketers are investing in startups now.
Correct.
So earlier you would have an actor just being a brand ambassador.
Yes.
But I think Mr. Salman Khan changed it all, where he invested other than just by doing a brand endorsement. I think it was Make My Trip or something like that.
Right.
And that trend has continued now with a lot of actors, celebrities, sports stars now investing into the startup ecosystem. It's not just the face, it's also giving them the capital.
Right. So yeah, there's multiple trends there. So we can start with sports because I'm a big avid sports fan. So quite a few of those investments have been in what I call adjacent areas. So sports also has become very data driven, right? And aspects of sports like how you play a cover drive, let's say the angle by which you lean into the ball or how your bat hits the ball, there's a lot of analyses around it. And that all is what I call sports tech. So naturally a sports person who's played cricket for a decade or two at a national level or any meaningful level would understand the need for this, right? Because they have probably seen it and not had the tech. But
very interesting.
If they see a startup, right? Let's say hypothetically there's an international cricketer who didn't play a certain shot well in his whole career, but still was a meaningful cricketer. Now they see a startup that is analyzing that very shot through data, through lots of simulations, and finding the best way to play a certain shot. They'll feel, oh yeah, this is an investable company because any cricketer at a club level or higher will want to improve their technique to be a successful cricketer. So it's a great financial investment. It's something they evangelize to because they understand sports.
Very interesting. And also you retired at an early age.
Yeah.
So I think then you have got good number of years ahead. So
Yes.
then you can actually be an investor and you can also be part
Correct.
of
So
the
again,
sports.
early retirement is another very good sub topic there because quite a few people have retired because of an injury. So let's say you got injured in the elbow and it cut 3-4 years from your professional career. And there's a startup that comes and says, we analyze sports injuries through data and we find cures that remediate those injuries faster than traditional cures. Anyone will understand that.
Very interesting.
And a sports person who's had his or her career cut short due to an injury would immediately find it a very investable company.
Very, very interesting. Devang, why don't you give us an idea of the family office interest? So we spoke about angel investor, we spoke about celebs investing.
Yes.
What and how do you see the family offices looking at startup from an investment asset class?
Yeah, so again, it's a very interesting trend and great for the whole industry because a lot of money is pouring in. Now, family offices, there's 2-3 kinds of investments. One is pure second gen family office. The first gen has done textiles, chemicals, traditional stuff. Second gen is not interested in that at all.
ये बहुत बड़ा change आ रहा है.
बड़ा change. तो इन लोग traditionally they are educated at elite universities.
थोड़ा सा मेरे को ऐसा लग रहा है देवांग एक आप पार्टी में हो और आप बोलते हो कि I'm an investor. I think एक कॉलर ऊपर होता है.
It adds a little bit to it. So I've seen this enough. The first generation has done what second generation thinks are boring businesses. Chemicals, fertilizer, manufacturing. These second,
they don't want to go through the grind.
क्योंकि वो उधर वलसाड पे जाके कौन प्लांट पे किसको जाने का है आज इन लोग जाते
तो ये दोनों तरफ से हो रहा है ना ये फाउंडर की तरफ से भी हो रहा है कि जो फाउंडर जो है he doesn't want to do the family business anymore and investor the younger the second generation they also don't want to go for the traditional investment and they would want to back a startup. I think it's a two-way
No, but I think the key point is the children, second generation kids, they come from some wealth. So first of all, they've been educated overseas at premier universities, Stanford, Harvard,
Perfect.
Oxford. Okay, so after that education, they come back to India. They don't want to go into
The traditional
industries. Or dad, uncle, professional management is managing it. Now the money, a lot of cash flow from the businesses. What do you want to do with that?
So there is existing cash flow from their business.
That comes up, you have a pool of money, 50, 100 CR, okay, go ahead.
क्या करें इसका?
अभी invest करें. Either you invest in next gen chemical technology that can somehow help our old age business, what I call adjacencies, okay, or you say no, I'm going to do something because the returns I get from this exceeds the return that I would have gained by putting into manufacturing.
Fantastic.
तो मैं ये 50 करोड़ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पार्ट में डालूँ, मुझे 10 to 12% रिटर्न मिलेगा बिकॉज इट्स अ मैच्योर इंडस्ट्री, उतना कुछ ग्रोथ नहीं है, इनोवेशन नहीं है, इट्स चल रहा है.
Innovation is the key.
हाँ, so but I want pure financial gain and I want my pulse. This is the most important. They want to have a pulse on the startup ecosystem. वो अपने धंधे में करेंगे, वो करते रहेंगे, पर वो उसको उनको पता ही नहीं है साइबर सिक्योरिटी में क्या हो रहा है, IoT में, स्मार्ट सिटी में, कैंसर में, फिनटेक में, एडटेक में, 15 जगहों पे क्या हो रहा है पता नहीं, क्योंकि वो 8-10 hours are just doing manufacturing and incremental changes in logistics or this that. So they want a lens on the whole country's startup industry and they want to invest in good entrepreneurs.
Let's end this beautiful discussion. Where do you see the growth of tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and name a few of your favorite investment hotspots?
The favorite, I've not even been to the city, but based on what I hear and read, Indore. Indore for the longest time, I don't know if it's true anymore, was the only city in India that had an IIT and an IIM in the city itself. It's very close to geographically to.
And incidentally, Indore are good investors.
Yes.
Real estate में हमारे बहुत सारे
Correct.
investors जो है ना वो इंदौर के ही है.
Correct. When I talk to people in Indore, they say it's germinating, it's not growing as fast as we would have liked, but it has all the a nice mid-sized city.
Even the infrastructure is good in Indore.
Very clean, it seems.
Surat is also doing good now.
Now Jaipur is coming up suddenly. All of a sudden.
Jaipur is coming up.
So all of a sudden, and there's some traditional shifts in wealth and thinking happens. So maybe a lot of the diamond wealth or some very पहले का.
ये आप बात मैं समझ रहा हूँ आप जो बोल रहे हो. I think जो diamond industry की हम बात करें, it's going through shambles now.
Correct.
So obviously they would want to change their line of business.
Correct. And again, the moment you have a generational shift now, they just don't want anything to do with the previous, no matter how wealthy it has made them in the first place. Moving forward, they don't want any part of that.
So I think what is adding now is mobility, transportation, better highways, better airports.
Correct.
I think these all are also
correct.
Kind of
these do help. I think you need a critical mass of young talent from an engineering and managerial standpoint. Basically 20 somethings that have entrepreneurial zeal and they have local capital. So Indore has a bit of this because I know there's some angel investors there and it's growing. Again, anecdotally, I don't have the exact numbers, but it has the characteristics, Indore and Jaipur, from what I read and hear, of tier 2 cities that have the potential to become big.
Right. So Devang, I would first express my gratitude for you to join us here at a very short notice, and we will look forward. We will, all my dear friends who are looking at startup from an investment point of view, do send us your questions or any kind of queries. And as we said, Devang, we have some good common friends.
Yes,
so hopefully, so there's another concept if you're working on is a boardroom kind of a concept, where we have about 4 or 5 guests coming together.
Yes.
So once we are season 2 today is the first episode. Once we complete our season 2, I think we're going to be starting these conference rooms, a conference boardroom kind of sessions. Yes. And we also are contemplating of going to colleges, by the way.
Yes.
and where we will be able to speak to the larger audience, the students. So wherever there is an opportunity, I would love to invite you and be a part of whatever we are doing.
I'd be honored.
Thanks a lot, Devang.
Thank you
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.